Welcome to the Daily AI News Digest for August 4th, 2026. I'm your host, and this broadcast is sponsored by bestai.org. Today, we're cutting through the noise to analyze objective market realities across the AI sector. No hype, just the facts. On the agenda for today's briefing, we'll examine the biggest market moves, break down product and model realities, look at the latest regulation and policy signals, and wrap up with our analyst's take. Let's start with the biggest moves today, specifically focusing on enterprise revenue and infrastructure scaling.
Palantir reported second quarter 2026 revenue of $1.94 billion. That's a massive 93% year-over-year increase. Alongside that top-line growth, they posted a record Rule of 40 score of 155%, which indicates highly efficient scaling in a scrutinized market.
If we look closer at the data, the standout metric is U.S. commercial revenue. It grew 149%, hitting $764 million. This gives us concrete evidence that AI deployment is actually translating into material enterprise software revenue, distinctly separate from the infrastructure spend we usually see dominated by the hyperscalers.
The company reported 220 closed deals over the $1 million mark in a single quarter. Following this, CEO Alex Karp stated that the demand for AI sovereignty has now been unleashed. The broader market clearly responded to these fundamentals, sending Palantir stock up 12%.
Turning to the physical constraints of AI scaling, Brookfield and NextEra Energy announced a staggering $100 billion capital commitment for an AI data center campus. Interestingly, they're building this at a former Department of Energy uranium enrichment site in Kentucky.
The sheer scale of this project points to a significant shift toward off-grid energy. Developers are utilizing a bring-your-own-power model to bypass local grid constraints. They're deploying 4.6 gigawatts of new power, split between 2 gigawatts of natural gas and 2.6 gigawatts of battery storage. To put that into perspective, this infrastructure will initially support 1.2 gigawatts of compute capacity, with plans to scale up to 1.8 gigawatts by 2032.
Moving on to product and model realities, covering frontier architectures and active API migrations.
On the model front, Alibaba made its 2.4 trillion parameter mixture of experts model, Qwen3.8-Max, generally available today. It features a 1 million token context window. Pricing is set at $2 per million input tokens and $6 per million for output. Based on initial published benchmarks, it's showing highly competitive performance in both multi-model and agentic tasks.
There is, however, a critical metric missing here. Alibaba hasn't disclosed Qwen3.8-Max's active parameter count. Without knowing exactly how many parameters activate per token, enterprise teams simply cannot reliably model the true serving cost or the hardware requirements for the upcoming open-weight release.
At the same time, OpenAI published documentation on its unreleased Astra model family. They provided Lean-4 machine-checkable certificates, proving Astra successfully resolved 10 decades-old mathematical problems through coordinated multi-agent execution. The core takeaway here isn't just the dense math. It's that Astra demonstrates a clear shift toward models that can handle long-running, autonomous reasoning. The model is currently pending U.S. government pre-release safety review.
For active developers, there is an API change requiring immediate attention. Grok Voice automatically migrates to ThinkFast 2.0 tomorrow, August 5th. If you're using the unversioned alias, you're going to see an automatic 60% price increase, moving from 5 cents to 8 cents per minute. To keep your current pricing, you must explicitly pin version 1.0 in your API calls before the end of the day today. Turning to our next segment, regulation, policy, and business signals, specifically the EU AI Act taking effect.
As of August 2nd, the EU AI Office now holds statutory power to inspect general-purpose AI models and, if necessary, restrict their market access across the European Union. For systems already on the market before this date, there is a brief relief valve, with a strict deadline of December 2nd, 2026, to meet these new technical requirements.
Under Article 50 of the Act, mandatory transparency rules are officially active. The grace period is over. Chatbots must now explicitly disclose their automated nature to users. Furthermore, all synthetic media and deepfakes must be clearly labeled and carry permanent, machine-readable digital watermarks.
Failing to comply with these transparency obligations carries severe operational and financial risk. The penalties for not properly marking and disclosing AI outputs are steep,
reaching up to 15 million euros, or 3% of a company's worldwide annual turnover, whichever number is higher.
Finally, we bring it all together with the analysts' take on what these developments actually mean for the industry.
The critical question for institutional investors and tech leaders today is exactly how these massive infrastructure deployments and strict regulatory frameworks translate into operational strategy.
The market reality is shifting rapidly, and we're seeing clear trends. AI is maturing into provable enterprise revenue, moving well beyond hyperscaler spending alone. Concurrently, physical compute limits are forcing operators off the traditional grid and into billion-dollar bring-your-own-power campuses. On the technology side, the value proposition is moving from instant chat capabilities toward long-running agents. And legally, opaque deployments are now an immediate financial liability under the enforced EU AI Act.
As sovereign infrastructure expands and regulation tightens, the gap between experimental AI and true enterprise-grade deployment is wider than ever. That concludes today's analysis. Thank you for joining us, and thanks again to our sponsor, bestai.org. We'll leave you with this to consider. As models become indistinguishable from human operators and our energy grids hit their absolute limits, who will ultimately control the physical bottlenecks of the next digital economy? Something to think about. We'll see you next time.